Hey y'all, it's Andrew with Free Tours by Foot New Orleans. As I speak, it is mid-December. We're just a little ways out from Christmas, and I thought today we could give y'all a sense of what New Orleans and the French Quarter look like this time of year. Be starting, as we so often do, in Jackson Square by St. Louis Cathedral, and we'll be exploring from there over to Artillery Park next to the Mississippi River, where we'll get a view of the city's Christmas tree, and we'll also be able to see the Mississippi and allude to some traditions that happen up the Mississippi River in Cajun country. From there, we're going to make our way down Decatur Street by some restaurants where we can get into the culinary and decorative traditions for New Orleans' Christmas. And we're also going to run into a statue of Joan of Arc that's going to help us tie together Christmas and our most famous holiday, Mardi Gras. And finally, we'll finish up at a place where you can, no matter when you visit us, get a sense of Christmas time any time of the year. That's going to be a similar route if you ever came and visited us to a live tour that we do every year during December called the Creole Christmas Tour. So if you like the stuff you see and you ever end up visiting us this time of year, this is something you could do with us live. And as you may already know, the live tours that we do, as our name suggests, all of them are free or low cost to join, and then you pay whatever you feel like they're worth at the end. So that's the model we operate on. That's how all of our guides make their living. If you like what you see today, you'll see a Venmo address, and you can hit us up in order to express your appreciation. And thanks so much to those of y'all who have done that already. It's real cool of you. So we call that tour the Creole Christmas Tour. And just before we start moving, the word Creole deserves a second of attention because we stick this word on pretty much everything in New Orleans that's special to us in some kind of way. It has a bit more specific of a meaning than that. So Creole basically meant in the 18th and 19th centuries, somebody who was born here but who was from non-native background, family-wise. And it said what you were, but it also said a lot about who you weren't. So among people in Louisiana, it said that you weren't Native American. For people who were maybe culturally French, it indicated that you hadn't been born in France, even if you maybe spoke French, were Catholic, had a lot of the other dressings that the same people from there shared. Later on, too, after the Louisiana Purchase, it came to mean that you weren't Anglo-American, which was the big crowd of people who were coming here, English speakers, Protestants from the northeastern United States. So there was a contrast there, too. And then after the Civil War, even later, it came to be a term that separated the African-descended population here from newly arrived people descended from the enslaved from elsewhere in the country. Again, a language and a religious gap, but also a closer and a further history with slavery, respectively. So, complicated term, lots and lots of layers to it. For our purpose today, basically it means the distinctive French-influenced Catholic-heavy traditions that happen here that you wouldn't see in most of the rest of the US. And for us, those things center really heavily on Jackson Square and on St. Louis Cathedral. This, if you ever came here on Christmas Eve, is where you would see caroling going on, yearly tradition. And actually, well before Christmas Day, through a lot of the month, St. Louis Cathedral and another church called St. Augustine Catholic Church over in the Treme, the next neighborhood this way, are going to do holiday concert series. So you could oftentimes stream those events, although they're amazing to do live. This is an incredible acoustic space. And it's a lot of different styles of local musicians doing Christmas music. And for someone who's really serious about jazz, you know, seeing a great jazz artist do Deck the Halls isn't necessarily something they're going to cancel their schedule for. But I will say, if you don't already know jazz really well or feel like you really get it, Christmas carols are actually kind of an in on how jazz works. It's this thing where there's not a definitive version of any given Christmas carol. There's lots of ways to do it. Maybe there's one you like the most, one that's really popular, but there's not a right one. There's just a tune, there's words, and then there's everybody's own interpretation of it. That's kind of how jazz standards work as well. If there's a tune, there might be a chord progression, sometimes there are words, and everybody gets to do their own version, which different people are going to find differently appealing. So if you're not already familiar with jazz, also blues, soul, lots of other stuff, lots of local styles, you can find the Christmas repertoire, some familiar, some less so, being represented in the concerts that happen here. So as we get into Christmas Eve, that's the big day for historic Creoles. I'm gonna say historic because by and large, the public side of Creole life starts to peter out 1930s, 1940s under the pressure of just Americanization. People here tended to become little by little more English speaking, more contemporary American. So definitely the big day for them would have been Christmas Eve, which you spend the whole day fasting and then going to midnight mass at St. Louis Cathedral. So that's a traditional thing for Catholics all over the world, but Creoles, famous for their food, so going a day without that food was a pretty big deal. And so after midnight mass was over, their big signature was they'd then go home and they would have a meal that made up for lost time. And that is called Réveillon. So Réveillon is a kind of like late night breakfast slash early morning dinner. Has some of that brunchy kind of booze meets coffee combination. It's going to be about some real classic local cuisine like gumbo, but it's also going to be about your seasonal foods like hunting that time of year. You know, migratory birds are going to be a big part of it. Y'all know. And then also citrus is coming into season when we're in the winter. So like a satsuma glazed quail or duck, something like that, would be a classic Christmas dish here. So those things, and then because you were coming straight from midnight mass, you wanted some things that were going to serve well cold. And there's a great example of like a meat-based gelatin called daube glacé that you find on Réveillon menu and not a whole lot else. So a pretty specialized menu, lots of things you don't see really made at all in the Creole world today. And again, these traditions kind of petered out, 1930s, 1940s. It was a family meal served at home, and that aspect of it is pretty much gone. But nowadays, it has been reincarnated as a restaurant meal, and it's one that's done all throughout the month of December. So you actually have a lot of chances to try a Réveillon meal. Réveillon meaning awakening. Fell on Christmas Eve, but now pretty much from the beginning of the month to the end, you can get a chance to try one. It's a lot of the upscale restaurants in New Orleans, Antoine's, Arnaud's, Galatoire's, Commander's Palace, that are gonna do these, but dozens altogether. Some of them are gonna do a really traditional menu. Some of them are gonna put their own spin on what like New Orleans winter tastes like to them. And oftentimes these are a slightly more affordable way to get a taste of one of these high-end restaurants. So worth a try if you're looking to save money, get a tradition you don't get to experience too often otherwise. And hey, if you are looking to vary your holiday tradition a little bit, you don't have to be here to look at those menus. So if you do a search for New Orleans Réveillon, Reveillon, then you can see what those menus are this year and past years, and those can give you some inspiration for shaking up the normal routine a little bit. Anyway, as we're getting out of the square, we're actually going to be passing a little bit ways towards one of the restaurants that's known for their Réveillon menu. We'll see that pretty soon. But I want to take y'all up to the river first. We're going to be passing as we go by Café du Monde. If y'all did the French Quarter tour with us, in person or the video that we made, this is one of the spots that you'd see. And for Christmas, they get to close. That's what that day means for them. Usually has often been a 365 days a year business. But Christmas, in the last few years, has been their one exception. We're going to go up and hit the riverfront because there's some traditions that happen outside New Orleans that are easy to miss, even if you visited here during December. As we go, we'll be getting up into the high winds. It's all of about 50 degrees Fahrenheit here right now, y'all. So the scarf is just for the look. I don't want y'all who live in brutally cold places to feel too bad. But for whatever consolation it may represent, this is a place where cold feels colder and hot feels hotter because it's wet and humid all year long. So if you do decide to travel here in the winter, pack a little heavier than you would normally for that same temperature. That's Café du Monde, y'all. When it's cold, they pull down the shades. So we're gonna go see the city's Christmas tree. It's a pretty straight up Christmas tree. You're not gonna see anything too out of the norm. Festive decorations for Creoles might have included a Christmas tree. It's a Victorian tradition coming out from England and expanding across the European and American world, but got here about a generation later than it gets to a lot of the US. And you would have seen a little bit of a different ornament tradition, crocheted snowflakes, the skill of mounting candles onto tree branches was a particularly Creole gift. And then other decorations would have been things like citrus. Since we don't have fall colors here to speak of, Citrus gives you that brightness during a drab season, and so some lemons on your table or a small lemon tree, something like that could really bring it home. What's up? Hey, how you doing? There it is, y'all. Again, simple, straightforward, but we get a little bit more distinctive with our New Year's celebration, where if you ever come here during New Year's, we have borrowed a New York tradition, doing a ball drop, only we drop a fleur-de-lis, which is that sort of stylized lily symbol that we put on everything here. That's going to be the spot right over there. You can see the rig up already. So this is where folks are going to gather on New Year's Eve, and New Year's Eve for Creoles was the gifting day, so also a very important day for them. Got the view of the river too, and right over there across the river in Algiers Point is where we'd have another local Christmas celebration a little bit before the holiday itself, where they're going to light a huge bonfire over there, and often of a huge wooden sculpture. It's setting something artful on fire. And that's a little nod to a tradition that happens up the river. So up in Cajun country, Cajun versus Creole, people get confused a lot, but you got a lot of cultures folded into both. Creole is going to be heavy on French, some Spanish, some German, some West African. Cajun goes heavier on the German elements, and Cajun also comes through Canada, the area called Acadia, which is where the word Cajun comes from. So they have their own traditions, and there's a lot of variation within Cajun people in general. And up the Mississippi a little ways, you got an area where the tradition is to light bonfires along the riverbanks on Christmas Eve. And the traditional ones are going to be kind of tall, narrow pyramids of just straight logs. But people have gotten more and more ambitious with time, and they will build giant alligators, they'll build a huge pickup truck, they'll build entire buildings that you can like walk through and set those on fire. And as of yet, no huge disasters have resulted from that. As far as where this tradition comes from, it's a little bit of a mystery. It's been going on in this one part of Cajun country going back into the 19th century, and whether that comes from some later French and German immigrants is unknown, but it definitely makes for a fun gathering opportunity that is really not a touristic one. So if you were visiting us and you were curious to see this, you would be setting off into kind of a really living slice of Louisiana culture that is not set up with, say, restaurants and restrooms and all that. There are some companies in town, more motorized tour companies than us, that would be able to bring you up to that stuff. So if you are ever visiting a few weeks into December, something to look into. So, talking of that German element, get on down by Decatur Street, explore it a little bit. We'll see a German-founded restaurant. And German Christmas tradition, and kind of Central and Northern European Christmas tradition in general, y'all, is definitely with us. And it's a thing where you see, so like Santa is cute and fun and affirming, and you know, children love him. He's the good cop. The traditions coming to us from Central and Northern Europe, it's kind of the same, except Santa is replaced with Saint Nicholas, who's a little bit more majestic and solemn. And then you have a companion that he comes with who's the bad cop. And this guy takes a lot of forms depending where you go, but he probably goes back to pre-Christian Europe and represents some kind of force that read to Christians as demonic, and so he came to be this demon creature. So most commonly, and in the form he's best recognized in the United States, his name is Krampus, K-R-A-M-P-U-S. And Krampus is this kind of big, dark, hairy demon who just walks along with St. Nicholas when he makes the rounds of whatever community and menaces the bad children while St. Nicholas offers gifts to the good children. It's definitely a more harsh parental version of the Christmas spirit. We love both of them here because we love costumes and we love scary stuff. And so you're gonna get out of the Christmas season both two parades that we do. The Crew of Jingle, which is the one that's gonna be all the cutesy Santa and reindeer and ornament stuff. And then you've got the Crew of Krampus, which is people in terrifying DIY costumes. So as far as the decoration of homes, you definitely get some of that Nightmare Before Christmas element, sometimes literally Nightmare Before Christmas, sometimes their own version of it, but definitely we tend to swing both of those ways. In terms of that German cultural presence, y'all, Two Jags right here, the second oldest restaurant in the city, was actually founded by a German woman. Goes back to 1856, although very recently they've moved away from this location. And Two Jags is actually a place, we mentioned the brunch aesthetic of coffee and booze mixed together. This is one of the places given credit for originating that this big city expo that was done that brought a lot of people visiting town and in a touristic capacity for the first time. They would go to this like late breakfast that was meant for people getting off of the overnight shift on the docks, and adding alcohol to a late breakfast really made what we know as brunch today. So one of the things we can thank Two Jags for, and they also give us one of the many excellent Réveillon menus in town. On the side of the street that we're on, y'all, opposite from Two Jags, is the French Market. A lot of it, many more blocks than just this, but you've got several blocks of retail through here, which are definitely popular Christmas shopping for folks who are so inclined. And if you wanted to see Christmas decorations in the vein of either the scary stuff or the upbeat stuff or whatever, it's definitely a good town to explore for those things. One of our classic favorites is gonna be what's called Celebration in the Oaks, and that's out in City Park, the largest park in the city. So if you get out there, anytime in December, you can do a ride either on a cute little train that they have in the park, on your own feet, through all these Christmas lights that they set up, which is gonna include some locally distinctive stuff. They have Santa's sleigh being pulled by alligators, that kind of thing. Also, a lot of the hotels in town are gonna have their own displays that they put up, whether it's some local piece of architecture as a gingerbread house or just a massive tree or any number of other things that they come up with, maybe changing from year to year. The real icon of those for us is a place called the Roosevelt. And the Roosevelt is a gorgeous place to visit any time of the year, right outside the French Quarter, an Art Nouveau type lobby. But during Christmas, they add these white lights all down that make it truly spectacular. So that's one that even those of us who live here, even though we've seen it before, give it a walk through every single year. And then you're also gonna have people who do things with their own homes on an unofficial basis, and St. Charles Avenue, already famous for all of its big mansions, is gonna give you some of the best. Not very many of those houses. It's pretty ambitious to be able to decorate an entire house like that, but the ones that do take it all the way. So definitely worth a streetcar ride any time of the year, but Christmas in the evening gives you an extra little oomph on top of all the things there that are already worth seeing. We've got just around the way, y'all, a statue of Joan of Arc. And the connection here is a little loose, so I'm gonna take the scenic route, bear with me. But this actually ties really nicely between Christmas and Mardi Gras. So, y'all know probably the song 12 Days of Christmas. If you've heard it once, it's burned in your memory forever, that melody. So you probably know what I'm talking about. And I, as a kid, always thought that 12 Days of Christmas was about the 12 days leading up to Christmas, that Christmas was like the culminating event of this season. And actually, in terms of the Christian calendar that it's based on, they begin with Christmas and then it keeps going after that. And it ends on January 6th, which is the beginning of Epiphany. And that also begins a season that here we call Carnival. So That last day, which you can refer to as 12th night, that's going to be the beginning of a really important season for us. Carnival is the entire season leading up to Lent. The season varies in length a little bit each year, but it always finishes on the Tuesday right before Ash Wednesday. Tuesday in French is Mardi, and because it's a day of indulgence and a season of indulgence before you go into all the austerity of Lent, it's called Fat Tuesday or Mardi Gras. So that idea of Mardi Gras comes to us from the Christian calendar and this last day of celebration before you go into Lent and start to swear things off until Easter. So how does that connect with this? Well, the thing we're famous for during Mardi Gras is huge float parades. Mostly those are going to take place in the 3 weeks leading up to Mardi Gras Day. But we also do have, on the very first day of the season, a few parades, smaller, simpler ones. And in general, parade groups, the ones who produce them, are called crews, K-R-E-W-E, like crew of Krampus, like crew of Jingle. And the very first parade to roll, one of the ones on that first day, is the crew of Joan of Arc. It's not the kind of parades that you might have seen on TV or in photos. It's much, much more DIY and low scale. There's no floats to speak of. It's kind of, imagine a Christmas pageant and a Renaissance fair meeting each other. All this kind of medieval pageantry, walking through the French Quarter, blessing a sword in front of St. Louis Cathedral, just like campy and goofy and totally sincere and fun. So on the chance that you ever come here for Christmas, worth staying a little bit longer so that you can see that, stay around till January 6th. If you don't mind staying another 5 or 6 weeks after that, you can then be around for Mardi Gras. And once Mardi Gras is done, you've got not too much more time before St. Patrick's Day and St. Joseph's Day. And then it's not too long until French Quarter Fest and then Jazz Fest. And basically this is how people move to New Orleans, is you have all of these things packed together right in a row. The statue too, y'all, that is our version of the Statue of Liberty. That's another gift from the nation of France delivered to American people, this one specifically to our city. And while it's not nearly as big as the Statue of Liberty, it is much more reasonable to maintain. So looking a lot shinier. We're stepping away from the French market, y'all. It keeps going down in this direction, but we're gonna give you a view of the other side of the street, looking in towards Chartres and Royal Streets. This is the part of the quarter where people live. So if you were to come pay us a visit and explore this time of year, this is where you'd find people doing home decorations and all that. Do your shopping over here for sure, but good to get out and see how at least a small number of locals who still inhabit the French Quarter are gonna do it. We love decorating for any and all times of year, and Mardi Gras, which we mentioned, has its own colors, just like Christmas does. And those are purple, green, and gold. Those go back to the very first parade of the crew of Rex, which is the king of Mardi Gras, in 1872. And the reason for why they chose those is obscure, but you will see them all over the city anytime we get to the Carnival season. And sometimes you'll see them outside of that time of year. So got a little sample of it for you over here across the street, along with some Mardi Gras iconography more generally. You can see a Mardi Gras flavored nutcracker, giving a little bit of a Christmas vibe. But the jester over here, that is pure Mardi Gras. Climbing lampposts is pure Mardi Gras. You got to be in a little bit of a crazy mood to do that. And in fact, it's a common enough impulse that people actually grease poles in the French Quarter during Mardi Gras to keep you from climbing up onto their balconies. So not a thing to try to do. It's not Carnival season yet, and yet here are these decorations. It's also not October, yet here is a Halloween window. I bet you can guess what's gonna come next. It is December, and so we have a Cajun Santa Claus over here. There's in the other window a kind of more typically American Santa, but Cajun Santa, we get, any and all places love to adapt him to the things that they're all about. So here he is going fishing. He's got his alligator, the other wildlife of the area. And y'all, if you grow up in Louisiana, you are almost invariably as a child read Cajun Night Before Christmas. And I know for me, first grade was probably the first time I ever heard this. And it is where, as you can see from the book, the idea of alligators pulling Santa's sleigh come from. So, you know, like anywhere else, we love to put our own spin on things, but it's all things that you would be able to feel your own traditions in, enjoy the little ways that they differ, but still steep yourself in the classics that you love. So yeah, y'all, anytime that you visit here, be it December or otherwise, you are going to see these Christmas windows and the other holiday windows on display. This is a store, Santa's Quarters, that sells Christmas paraphernalia and other holiday decorations all throughout the year. And they've been doing that since 1976. So how this place has survived, you got to bend your mind around it a little bit. And the things they've survived through, these people made it through Hurricane Katrina. So a lot of businesses, including New Orleans classic restaurants, didn't survive that. They have made it through the advent of the internet by creating an online store, which only sort of looks like their 14-year-old made it for them. And just the changing trends in retail claim a lot of retail establishments, and it just kind of suggests that like ornaments are a perennially worthwhile souvenir to bring home to somebody. You know what you're gonna do with it. So they've made it all that distance. And if you wanted to get your hands on either that book or, you know, an alligator to hang on your Christmas tree, something like that, some very New Orleans-y looking thing, definitely can find it on their website, Santa's Quarters from the French Quarter. And besides that too, they carry anything and everything else. I ran into a friend there once who was about to go to a time travel party, and she wanted to make a wig that was time travel themed, and she knew if she wanted to find a miniature TARDIS from Doctor Who, that this was the only place where you'd find something like that. So found her in the Doctor Who section where she had the choice between that and lots of other Doctor Who items. So peruse that website and you can make a whole tree themed around anything whatsoever, or a wig themed around anything whatsoever. So with those inspirations in mind, hopefully we leave you with some ideas. Watch for those concerts at St. Louis Cathedral and St. Augustine Church. You can look for what the bonfires up in Cajun country are going to look like this year. They come up with something new all the time. Check out some photos of celebration in the Oaks. Check out the Réveillon menus. And in general, you can lay the groundwork for a visit here this time next year. If you were curious to learn more about Creole culture other times of the year, our French Quarter tour is always going to get into that stuff. You could do that live here in person, or we've got a video one online. Same goes for the Garden District if you wanted to learn more about those big mansions uptown, and we have lots and lots of others. If you liked what you saw today, for one thing, you can hit like down below. If you subscribe, any other videos that we make, you'll be able to track them down. And let us know what you would like to see down in the comments, any other thoughts you might have. And as we mentioned, you're going to see that Venmo ID. Feel free to hit that up if you'd like to support us, and thank you so much. Have a great day.